Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We are all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
Are you troubled by strange noises in the middle of the night?
Do you experience feelings of dread in your basement or attic?
Have you or any of your family ever seen a spook, specter, or ghost?
If the answer is yes, then don't wait another minute. Pick up your phone and call the professionals.
Ghostbusters.
Our courteous and efficient staff is on call 24 hours a day to serve all your supernatural elimination needs. We're ready to believe in you.
Perfect.
Who are you going to call?
Ghostbusters.
Da-da-da-da-da-da. All right, guys, if you couldn't guess by now with that excellent acting you just heard in your ear holes, we're going to be talking about Ghostbusters today, the 1984 classic. There's a podcast called Stuff You Should Know, and they like to say that everything is pre-Ghostbusters or post-Ghostbusters in the timeline that they exist in. So today we're going to be talking about Ghostbusters. We're going to be touching upon kind of the impact of academic isolation on social skills as we see it with the three main characters, Peter, Venkman, Egon, and Ray. And then also kind of as a comparative, Winston, as someone who's a bit more socialized. And we're also going to talk about innovation mindset. We're going to touch upon treatment and final thoughts as always. So let's jump right into it. So, one, we did do a Google, and you can get a degree in parapsychology. We were not sure as psychology, professionals ourselves, but you can do it.
You can.
You can. So anyone who was wondering about that.
Whether or not that the PhDs in psychology and parapsychology as owned by one Dr. Peter Venkman were real, the answer is a resounding yes.
And I will say, too, I know I did this, is the movie kind of opens with two students doing a psychological experiment, like being part of a psych experiment. And that is true. Like I don't know if it was just me because I was a psych undergrad major, but I was a part of a number of psych experiments similar to the two students in the beginning of the movie. So in case you haven't experienced that yourself, that is a pretty normal thing. Yep. In universities to have regular schmegular students have to come in and do kind of odd experiments.
Yep. So it's a requirement for many Psych 101 courses that you have to participate in like 4 hours of research.
Yeah. I think I had to do, 10. Like I had to be a part of 10 different things. And it was some of them were very odd. And one I had to sit in a sensory isolation room with big headphones on and listen to beeps and push different buttons depending on the kind of beep. So it is kind of what you see in movies, sort of. Yeah, so I can fact that.
I had one where they would draw a line on my hand and then but not let me see my hand. There's a divider. And then I had to draw the same length of line that they drew on my hand on a piece of paper. Mm. And I also had one that tested disgust where they asked a whole bunch of different questions in different scenarios with if you noticed that uncle left dirty underwear in the house, would that be more disgusting or less disgusting than an aunt who had done the same thing? And I think we subject students to a lot of weird things as part of these studies. But I also think that most of them are run past an ethics board, which Dr. Venkman clearly ignored.
His also didn't look very official. Look, they were in a basement of some kind.
Well, I
That
will
looks
also
bananas.
well, I will say, Hannah, where I also will fact check on that is I did feel like when I did these experiments, it was in very similar weird settings. It was like I would have to go into a random building, walk up, like go up 4 flights of stairs, go down a hall, around a corner, like definitely like the beginning of a horror movie energy whenever I would do these psych experiments.
Yeah, I wasn't a psych undergrad and didn't go to a regular college. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it's definitely an
Creepy.
interesting experience for sure.
Yep. But it's
And
also why there's so many research studies that have questionable results now, because so many of them were normed on 18-year-old middle class white college students. And
Ben, I was about to say the same thing. We're on the same level. We're psychically linked right now.
I
mean,
that.
Brittany, I have to tell you guys something, that I have been working on my PhD in parapsychology. And one of the classes that I've been working on is telepathy.
No. My thoughts. I have to wear a Magneto helmet.
Be my guest, Ben.
Yeah, but
fucking luck in there, man.
Yeah, but you're totally right, Ben, which is like, so all these studies that we all like to throw around, there's a good chance it was based on a very narrow set of people.
Yeah. I mean, and looking at the study where we're seeing him use electric shock on the student who's the male student, because he got some things right and he still shocked him anyway. He was obviously using the study to try to pick up students, which is just one of the several creepy things that he does throughout the film. But watching this movie and like immediately seeing a psych professional do unethical things makes my skin crawl.
Yeah, the opening introduction to Venkman is him being which I think is kind of the Bill Murray typecast of that time, which is being like a charming creep. That was kind of his thing back then.
I mean, the 80s were a weird time. Time, and I'll give it that. But it's just like seeing that now, that so many tropes, even in a movie that I have grown up with and loved, now that I'm in a profession, like for that to immediately put me on edge and defense of my profession, it irritated me.
Yeah.
Like, really? Even Ghostbusters. Like, why is it that every movie we watch that the psych professional is trying to have sex with the client? Check. Is doing something unethical and creepy? Check.
I mean, it works on a few levels where like he's also I assume a professor or just a professional within his department. I mean, it's the thing where we're going to touch upon, which is sort of this kind of arrested development that all three of them are in, where they are just not acting like well-adjusted grown-ups, like all three of the main guys.
No, they definitely aren't. I mean, and that's part of the comedy of the film, right? Is like seeing like, look at these three weirdos. But like how
it kind of is. I mean, it's kind of
like oddballs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're classic 80s screwball characters, which means that they all are acting in a way that is not typical. And also because they are, I think, classic 80s screwballs, is that they also aren't like necessarily diagnosable, So I think what we're going to kind of touch upon today, which I think is a good convo, is how your environment can create atypical behaviors, just because of normalization or lack of correction or experience. But that doesn't mean that there is something diagnostically wrong with you. You know what I mean? And that's why as we've talked about in many episodes, you have to be very mindful as a mental health practitioner that when you are getting to know your clients, you really have to ask a lot of pertinent questions about like, how were you raised? Who raised you? Like, what's your current social situation? Because you want to make sure that you're not unfairly throwing a diagnosis on somebody because they're, I guess, for lack of a better word, odd or eccentric or doing odd stuff. Because right away in this movie, we see they finally get kicked out of their department. And Ray does say to Venkman, you've never not been at school. So we are dealing with 3 grown men who have never been out of school. So you got to think about that first and foremost.
Right. And factoring that into an assessment of what you're seeing and what behaviors might be normalized in the setting that your client has currently been socialized to is an important part of understanding who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like someone who's used to being in a setting where they're around other people who are all dedicating their life to similar study and similar interests can definitely sit with people and talk about layers upon layers of detail that might actually be interesting conversation to them that would be a very big social faux pas with the general population because it's so detailed that other people will be like, what's happening here?
It reminds me of, I don't think it's necessarily criteria for being on the autism spectrum, but a presentation or like a way that it can present is having special interests. And what that means is that if you're on the autism spectrum, you might have special interests, which is one topic that really engages you. So you get really like honed in on, like, I love dinosaurs. And so I learn everything about dinosaurs. And when I meet somebody, I just want to tell them all about this new dinosaur fact I learned. I have dinosaur shirts and even well into like adulthood. Or it can be like, I used to work with a kid where his special interest was like 80s action movies. Like all he ever wanted to talk about was Predator, which is like so funny to me. Predator and Predator 2.
Is that my brother? Because
maybe no. And so I wonder too, in like academia, it really gives you the ability to also engage in special interests really intensely and in a way that's really validated. I'm not saying that you have to have special interests because you're on the spectrum to do academia, but I'm like, I can see where there's an overlap in that Venn diagram.
Of course. And I mean, just for pure like knowledge base here, backing up the point is that Dan Aykroyd is long known to have been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome in the 80s. And he based the character of Ray Stantz around that diagnosis. And so you see some of those behaviors of like Ray, probably much like Dan, is a high functioning version of someone who has Asperger's, but when he gets excited and really interested in something, you see his social graces disappear. Like when Peter is clearly in the middle of a research study and Ray just busts in like, we got to go. We got a big one. Like, and you see Peter get really annoyed with him. I mean, we'll also credit that Peter was being creepy and was trying to hit on the student, but also not okay because that's power imbalance. But again, anyway, but seeing that we see Ray just throughout the movie show little bits of signs when he gets really excited at something, he is completely tuned out of the conversation. Like Egon and Peter are working the real estate agent when they're in the firehouse and like Egon's like, this place should be condemned. And then Peter is obviously working the salesman angle using his social aptitude to be like, so let's talk about a discount kind of conversation. That's where he's going. And here comes Ray sliding down the pole going, does this thing work? Wow, this is great. We'll take it. And then I
think it's his money, right?
It is his money.
It was his mortgage.
Money.
Yeah.
His parents' house or something.
The house his parents left for him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great observation, which I didn't really think about, is how Ray is he comes off very childlike.
He does.
Like very, like you're saying, very excitable, very interruptive in the way that little kids can be when they get excited about something. They're so honed in on that. They're not really picking up on the environment. Like, is this the time to have this conversation? Or is this what we have this, which you're right. Like he has probably the most, which I would credit to Dan Aykroyd, the most probably authentic presentation of something that we might diagnose if we knew a bit, like if we watched the characters for longer.
Right. Because when you look at Egon, you see that he's very flat. He's very matter of fact. He's very direct and he's very serious. And he even jokes about that he's always serious. And I think a lot of people would look at him and wonder if he would meet criteria for that. And I think it's a fair question that, would Egon be somebody who might be presenting as someone on the spectrum too? But also, Egon is a scientist who is viewing people as subjects, and the things that he's interacting with are business decisions. We very rarely see Egon interacting just with his friends. And when he does, he appears to be very socially competent, even though he's just always serious.
Yeah, I agree with that. He does. He seems like, I feel like he seems like someone who has actually adapted well in terms of, or at least has more social skills than the other two, just kind of in general. And I feel like it is more that he's just a serious person, but also they're literally discovering new things throughout the entire movie. So there's also a reason for him to be so serious the whole time. Right. Yeah.
You could argue that he has to be the serious one because Ray is so all over the place and Peter is always making a joke out of everything. So I wonder too if Egon has to take up more of the serious older brother mantle because the other two, you can't trust them to do that for various reasons.
Right. Like their dynamic would not work without Egon being the person who's on top of things.
Because I would say where you could maybe like most, not accuse, but stamp, I guess, autism onto Egon is his interactions with Janine. But that could be purely the receptionist, but that could be purely because he does not want a relationship with Janine. And so he's trying to maybe like put her off by being even like extra flat and not maybe responsive to her.
Into him.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
You might call me an intellectual. I love to read. What are you into? I also love to play racquetball. I love her voice.
He just seems like, he also seems like it would be more of a professional relationship too, where like I don't know that he would necessarily be because he is at work.
Right. Like I think it would be a question that's worth asking, but I think the answer based on the information we have is probably no.
Well, not only that, but the other thing, I agree. And the other piece that I know that we talk about and point out to people is that if it's not causing, if it's not making an impact on their life in any way, in a negative way, or they're struggling with it, where things, where it's hard to keep a job or it's hard to have relationships or it's hard to whatever. It also, from what we see anyway, it doesn't seem like his life is having an impact on his life anyway.
Or in a way that he minds. Like, they're none of them. I mean, Peter seems like he might be trying to date, whatever his version of that means. It's a friggin' creep. But they seem pretty isolated because they're isolated in the world of academia, which if you are like a PhD or if you are, because a big part of why I guess I think of academia as very isolating is, well, one, because it's like just like the social bubble you're within. And then two, there's a big like parish or public, like publisher parish kind of mindset as well. And so there's also a pressure to always basically be a workaholic, which can cause a lot of social dysfunction, like social deficits, just because because social skills are like any other skills. You got to lose them. You use them or lose them. Like you will become rusty socially if you're not using them. And so I think one, we might be seeing an offshoot of that. And then two, Ray and Egon seem content, like you're saying, to just kind of be doing their work, have their heads down, really be really immersed in their work. And that's satisfying. And that's okay. Like you were saying, Hannah, it's not even necessarily like there's a one layer is causing dysfunction within your life in the sense that you can't take care of yourself, right? Like I can't hold a job. I can't make money. I can't have relationships. And also there's a part of it, like the kind of softer version of that is if you are happy with the life you're living and it's not causing harm, like that's not dysfunctional to you. Like, if I wanted to, I could look at Ray and Egon and be like, you are very dysfunctional. Like, this isn't the way you should be living. Like, you should be more social. You should be more adaptable. And I don't think that's fair. And I hope no therapists who are listening do that because if someone's living the quality of life that they like, that's okay. Like if I work with somebody and they just wanted to be fully academically focused and not like data, I'd be like, do you? Because also I think one thing we're not taking into account, and this is me reading into it more than maybe we should, is like, you know, as far as we know, Egon could be asexual. Like he could have no romantic leanings. And so maybe his approach to Janine is like, I'm just not interested. Because as we see in the sequel, she starts dating or fooling around with Lewis, which is an interesting character development choice.
It's so good. Those two, just Annie Potts and
Rick Moranis.
Rick Moranis.
God, they're so funny.
Really killed all of everything he had to do in that movie was so ridiculous. It was.
We'll talk about someone else who can't read a social cue. Is not to get sidetracked, but Lewis. Yeah, like he cannot read a room to save his. He has a special interest, which is being an accountant. He swerved his special interest into his work, which is great. Or, yeah, like it's like when he told people at his party, I invited clients, not friends. So it's gonna be a write-off. You don't tell your guests that you invite them to a party because they're a tax write-off, bro. And if he was my client, I would probably be like, how do you think that sounds? Let's do a little role play, and let's now I'm going to be you, and you can be a guest. How did it feel to hear that? So he might be somebody that might need some social training in that arena. Though I know,
he definitely does.
Yeah,
he definitely does. Yeah, I think it's interesting that we brought up this like concept of like social skills and the impact of academic isolation, like we're talking about here. Because as I'm thinking about this. My father is a professor, or I mean, he's a retired professor now, but I remember watching my dad and his friends interact when they would come over for pizza. And like, number one, I literally just sent my brother a text asking, is Dad Egon? Because I've never seen a character like Henry Jones, like Professor Henry Jones, not Indiana Jones, Professor Henry Jones and Egon. You know, if we played like the which three characters make up a person, like I don't know what other one I'd pick, but those two are definitely my dad. And watching Egon interact with people and seeing him like be so serious all the time, like he is, and recognizing that when my dad was around his professor friends, like. There was one of them that was absolutely Bill Murray. Just was absolutely Bill Murray. But the others would always be on this intellectual level of conversation that is just so beyond what most people talk about and what depth and what things they're considering. And that's just normal. It's because that's the social construct that they operate in at work all the time, because that's the environment they're in. Right. That's the baseline. I mean, these people, you know, go to school their entire lives, stay in school, work in schools, and are faced with rigorous academic challenges to every paper that they try to write in this publish or perish mode, where other people who also do the same thing, the way I look at it is they sit in dark rooms on spikes drinking coffee in buildings with no bathrooms, and then criticize everybody else's work. These are also the same people that write Medicaid statutes.
Oh, that sounds right.
But I like am thinking about this and realizing that I grew up watching this, and you absolutely see the difference in people that have dedicated their lives to study and how intensely serious it is, because it becomes their identity and how they interact with people that are their peers.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the continued like thing we're bringing up, which is normalization of a style of being, and if in a way of socializing. And it's when you're engulfed in that world, it's just the way that you learn how to think. It's the way you learn how to interact, and when you're fully immersed in it, like we see them, and we get to kind of witness them come out of that world. You see them struggle to adapt that social skill set to a business model. Because I think also what is rough for them, and I imagine would be rough in a general sense, is they have to swerve from a purely academic place to a salesman place, which requires a lot of social skills, a lot of adaptability. Luckily, they have such a niche skill set that it kind of overrides their lack of social skills or their lack of social adaptability is how I'd more put it.
And 80s TV commercials were so bad.
Yes, I do miss a good local ad. Yeah.
So much stepping up to be on cue and then stepping back.
Yeah.
They still run the Victory Auto Wreckers commercial here in Chicago. I feel like if you watch TV long enough, you'll come across the Eagle Man. And I know you guys aren't from here, so I'm gonna have to make you watch these, but Chicagoans will know. Victory Auto Wreckers is a commercial. It must have been from the 70s where this guy goes to open his car door and the door just falls off. And he stands in his bell bottoms, sticking his hands up in the air, and you're they still run that commercial today.
There's an ad in Michigan, RPM Auto Sales, and it's this neon green color is the color of the ad, and it always looks really bad. And the red is they have the letters in red.
Oh no,
it's horrible.
No.
But they have this little. I can't remember it right now, but they have this little what are they called? Songs for commercials. Mm-hmm. They're called something.
Jingles.
Jingles. Mm-hmm. They had this jingle, and as soon as you would hear, there's a loud sound when the ad starts, and it'd be ugh. And if you watch TV after midnight and you don't have cable, it's every other commercial is them.
Oh my God, it's buying up all the ad time.
Yeah.
But you see, because in the movie they luck out by what they're doing just comes to fruition, the library ghosts and the other things happen. Yeah. But you do see there is a chunk of time when they aren't making any money, Peter Venkman very rudely, gets on Janine's ass because he comes in there and they're and she's no calls. And he's okay, they do struggle, if they don't have the stroke of luck that is actual paranormal happening in New York. I don't think it would be interesting if they ever would survive as business people, just because they'd really have to adapt. Because I would say the most, I guess we said Egon, but Venkman comes off as the most socially adept in the sense of he's Bill Murray, which is why, because he's a little charming little fucker, because Bill Murray is a little charming little shit. Hannah and I watched it together we always do. We were so much wanted to not like Bill Murray because his character acts just skeeve, and then he would do something and Hannah and I would be God damn it, he's so charming though.
Yes. He is.
Right. He's very likable, which is why he gets away with that kind of absolute boundary crossing. But I found myself thinking about a lot of my female clients in particular that have come in and talked about experiences they've had with repair people or salesmen or anybody being in their house and acting like Venkman, just being completely inappropriate, and that making them really uncomfortable. And not all of them were as strong and secure as Dana was saying, get out. Yeah.
Well, I think that's where his Arrested Development really shows is he feels like he's still a teenager, and not just a teenager, but a teenager maybe with conduct disorder. When I was talking to Hannah about it, I was I don't even necessarily want to give him an adult diagnosis, because for people who are just listening to this episode, because we've talked about before, but conduct disorder is a diagnosis you only give people who are under the age of 18. If they're still presenting with a lot of symptoms of conduct disorder post 18, they would probably get a antisocial personality disorder diagnosis. So and we don't see necessarily any of the violent parts of conduct disorder, because that would includes it can be in violence, intimidation, hurting animals, fire starting, all the sort of stereotypical serial killer-y stuff they talk about in movies. That you don't, just because you have conduct doesn't mean you're going to become a serial killer. I just want to say that. But no. I think he does a lot of what you can see in conduct disorder, which is boundary pushing, and being sexually provocative when you shouldn't be. And he is a bit more aggressive, though. He slaps Ray several times in the movie. And he does have a lot of he's argumentative, he's provocative, he does have a lot of those traits that conduct disorder can have. And part of conduct disorder can be being charming.
You are describing narcissism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think I'm thinking of conduct because in my brain, he's a teenager. Like I'm thinking of him like a younger person. And so I think that's why conduct kept ringing my bell, though I'm definitely open to other thoughts.
I mean, I think when I'm hearing conduct, it's like, it's rubbing me the wrong way because I'm going like it has such a stigma to it.
Thanks
it's like,
for that.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
I could make some more strange noises if you'd like.
No, that's
Thank
good.
you.
Okay. Well, I mean, just let me know because I've got them on cue. But we see so many like narcissistic traits where he kind of walks around thinking that he's the best. He expects people to adore him. He expects to get his way. He expects to win. And he doesn't tolerate or operate in any reality where that there would be consequences for his behaviors if he doesn't do things because he's the greatest. Like his reaction to the dean firing them is very typical of the way someone who, you know, I'm not saying he has narcissistic personality disorder, but he sure has elevated narcissism as a personality trait.
And I think what drifts it more into what you're saying versus conduct is that if he had more of that or like more antisocial behavior, when Sigourney Weaver's character Dana, when she is all like possessed, when she is all, what's her character? Is she Zool?
Zool.
When
Yeah.
she's fully Zooled, she's very like provocative with him. Like she's trying to have sex with him basically. And if he was more of where I was going, he would have taken advantage of that, which is where when I was watching the movie where I shifted what I was thinking, Ben, because I was like, because if he was more on that level, he would have taken advantage of her sexually in that moment. And instead he goes into a caretaker mode, which is actually atypical of his presentation, but speaks a lot more of maybe where what we've been talking about, sort of like the social skills part of it is, of like how much of his behavior, a persona that he's developed in the world that he's lived in. And then when push comes to shove, he's actually a more like considerate person. Like I said, with her specifically, he does do really good caretaking work with her once he realizes that she is in danger.
Yeah, he definitely switches out of something, which is why I don't think there's any evidence that he has a personality disorder because he switches in and out. He definitely has elevated narcissism. He thinks highly of himself in ways that the movie goes out of its way to show are not justified because he's like doing nothing and publishing nothing useful and his research is garbage, etc. That the dean
is otherwise useless, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he has no evidence to back up how cocky he is.
Right. He does not. But he still expects others to just treat him like that because because he's there. And seeing him recognize that when the situation no longer allows for him to be irresponsible, that he has to step up, he does. He turns it back off and contains it.
Yeah.
Like when the situation gets emotionally intense, I think the only thing that strikes me is like possible, like seeing antisocial or conduct-y type behavior is the constant antagonism of the EPA rep.
Yeah.
But that guy also came in hot and antagonistic, and
that guy was a maniac.
And it also
he has no dick, so
yeah, he's dickless, yes.
It means he doesn't have a dick, though.
It's true. This man has no dick.
Best line of the whole movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think it is also that classic thing, which we touched upon in the Mrs. Doubtfire episode of, you know, what can get in our way can be a strength if we can reconfigure it. And so with Venkman, it is the strength that he is like, has strong convictions. He stands up for himself and what he believes in, you know, and so in working with him, your role as a therapist what I'm thinking, it would be to kind of restructure, like, these are your strengths. So how can we use our strengths in a way that doesn't piss everybody off or get us in these situations where we can't keep a girlfriend, or we can't keep a job, or we can't keep like a placement in a university, or however that would come out for him. And so, because you're right, like he has a strong skill set to build from. He just, I think, hasn't had a chance to use it like a grown up. And you can also see in like how the movie opens, if he's choosing to get involved with young women, it's also another way to never have to grow. Like if you continue, because one, he gets to feed narcissistically off the dynamic of the power thing of like, you're always going to seem like the super wise professor type to these young girls who don't know any better. It's gross. It's super gross.
It's gross.
Because you never have to change and adapt, and you never really get challenged. Mm-hmm. And then eventually they graduate and you don't have to see them anymore. You can keep on. It's very Matthew McConaughey and Dazed and Confused. And also, I'm having a Hannah moment. I don't know where the rest of that thought was going. Wow. No? I think that's where that's happened to me. I had like a Hannah brain. A brain fart.
A Hannah brain? Did you just call a brain fart a Hannah brain?
A Hannah brain fart.
You're taking a drink in between the middle of that statement was not a great choice, Brittany.
Apologies. Both of you. But you can put a little spot on the bingo card for that.
So anything else on this particular topic?
Well, I think it really shows. I do like Winston. The character of Winston doesn't get enough play in the movie.
No, he doesn't.
I think
Ernie Hudson is such a great actor.
Yeah, he is.
He's a good example of someone who comes in who is a socialized adult man. He's very confident. He has more of an idea of like the danger that they're in. He's like, this is not worth this. Like you can kind of see on his face, like, I just wanted a job. Like I didn't want to risk my life. And so he's someone who has more, I think, mixed priorities, like probably more balanced priorities. And so he's a good foil for how socially underdeveloped the other three characters are.
Ooh, that's a good word.
Foil?
Socially underdeveloped, which now I can't say, so I say socially.
Socially underdeveloped, yes.
That was not a great Batman voice moment, guys.
Mm-hmm. It does make me interested to watch the sequel again and see if there's any growth character-wise between the first and the second movie.
Well, they fall so hard because they become like the social pariahs.
Oh, yeah.
Because they go to like doing birthday parties and then no one cares about them anymore because it's so many years afterwards.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah,
because they were so famous. Like they're tech and their hero status. Everything fades away in the sequel, and then they regain that. That's part of the plot. Is like they had such a booming business and then it crashed.
Well, the problem is that they fixed the problem. And so then they worked themselves out of a job in this movie.
I wish the pharmaceutical industry would learn that trick.
They don't want to. That's why they won't.
Too much money. Too much money.
So I think, So I think we touched upon, like the impact of environment basically on social skills development and growth. And we work in a field, like we were saying, where there's a lot of PhDs and PsyDs and people who are in school basically for a long time and the impact on that. And I know the next thing that you wanted to touch upon, Ben, was the concept of innovation mindset. So I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, well, let's take a quick break here before we do that. So when we were watching this movie, I was thinking like this isn't a particularly deep psychological movie compared to some of the ones that people ask us to do. And when watching this, I was thinking about like, okay, well, we certainly see the narcissism, and you guys brought up this point that we've been discussing about the isolation that comes from certain topics. But then I'm watching it and thinking, well, what is it about this movie that has caused it to endure for so long? Because while it's funny, it's not hilarious. And while it's fun to watch, it's You know,
old as fuck, and all this shit is old as balls.
It's old, but yet we still have costuming groups that go to conventions and dress up like Ghostbusters, and people want to see them at charity events.
And they look cool.
I mean, they do. I mean, the costume department in this movie nailed it.
Mhm.
Like, they made it look accessible and made it look cool at the same time, and like just enough, like, you know, vagueness on the technology that people can project into it, whatever, later. But they use very vague terms like laser containment system in the movie. But anyway,
laser containment system.
You know how that is.
There's lasers. Like, lasers are cool. I mean, science.
Lasers are cool, guys.
If you don't know, just throw a laser in there.
Yeah,
The script, and that'll take care of that problem.
Anyway, sorry, Ben.
No, it's okay. I mean, this movie is successful because we see three friends interacting and we see them find success. And I think that when I was watching this, I was wondering, like, what is it about it is that these guys present kind of as everyman characters, even though they're not. They have multiple PhDs and they're extremely smart, especially Egon. Egon is at an intellectual level beyond what most people get. His IQ is very high.
And they're not slanging and banging with the ladies either, which is something that that people tend to revere in in male characters.
Right. But most people aren't doing that either. And to think about what's something that all of us have considered at one point in time in our life is like, what if we bought a firehouse with working fire poles and were able to slide down them and come up with this entire business plan, become rich, famous, and successful, living in a place with my friends and hanging out all day, doing exactly what we like and proving everyone who fired us wrong?
I mean, I think it's very well. This movie was very. I think it was intended to be for adults, and then they realized pretty quickly how much it appealed to children. I mean, I think it had the TV show, the animated show, had a bigger impact on me as a kid than the movie.
Right. The real Ghostbusters. I loved that cartoon. I still have the firehouse and the proton packs. The Ecto one. I've got the stuff. I've got it.
I don't know what the fuck you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
We are going to watch that.
It was like a Saturday morning cartoon situation
on USA.
Oh, okay. But I don't know if this is where you're going, Ben, so feel free to redirect after I talk. But I think it is appealing, like you're saying, to imagine a world in which you can do your special interest. Like you can really throw yourself with your friends in the thing that you like to do. I think there's, as being a part of the glumness that can be associated with growing up, is that you have to then do something you don't really like to do every day until you die. And it's just business and bills and no fun. And so I think what this movie is showing is a world in which you can keep doing the thing you like to do when you were 8 and do it with your friends and kind of dress up and be silly and goofy. And you, like you're saying, be your own boss. Like there's no adult like authority that you have to really, besides the EPA, that you really have to ascribe to. So I think it is that wish fulfillment of kind of being young forever, which ironically is kind of what we were talking about in like the not so positive spin earlier. But I think it is, I think that's what, in hearing you say that, I think that's what comes up for me.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I mean, is that recognizing that part of what makes it so enduring is we get to see these guys win. Yeah. Especially in this movie, we get to see these guys win. We get to see the man come in and fuck with them and tell them that they're wrong and that they're dumb and that their research is stupid and that their life's work sucks. And then we see these guys go on and go like, say, all right, well, I'm just going to keep doing my thing exactly in my way and it's going to work out. And last I checked, we saw a couple other guys do that right around this time, maybe a little before, named Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, who were probably told their whole lives that their ideas were stupid, that no one was going to use computers. And now look at them. Look at what the world became.
Yeah, and also you can argue with both those jokers that that other factors of their life significantly suffered. So I guess you have to you have to put some.
They're also
around
both
the term
rich
winning.
white men. I think they're fine.
Well, Bill Gates is really struggling socially right now, guys.
Right, but what I mean is that rather than like revere the wealth, is like look at the story that would have been painted at that point in time is like seeing the world start to change over to their ideas, and we see these guys get to do that too, and the power corrupted versions that we see now, like stealing data and all that kind of stuff. That's not the side of the story people look at, because nobody sees themselves as the villain in their own story.
Yeah.
And I think watching this movie and recognizing that we see these guys get to live the fantasy that a lot of people have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think everyone wants to be, like you're saying, the hero of their own story, but I think more than that, even like the rebel or the radical in their own story. Like, I believe in something radical, and I can believe in it so hard that it comes to fruition. And I think everyone wants to be that guy, like cool guy who comes in and like busts open double doors, in a movie and is like, I'm doing something different, and it works. And then you can give the middle finger to everybody else. I mean, unfortunately, I think a lot of those stories are told through the realm, through the, white men and not like women or people of color. Unfortunately, which is, we saw the toxic version of that when they remade it with women, and everyone lost their goddamn minds.
Yeah. Right. Before they even saw it. Before they saw it, they lost their minds. I haven't seen it, so I can't speak to it. I've had a lot of people, say like, it's not just.
Excuse me?
I haven't seen that one yet.
Wow. Part of the problem.
I can't speak to it.
Wow.
I had a child.
You need to see it for
right
Chris.
around
I
when
had
it
a
came
child.
Out. That movie has been out for a while, Ben.
In 2018, when my child was born.
Yeah, but you've seen plenty of movies since then, bro.
Sure have.
Right, and one
sure have.
Right, I didn't see that one yet.
Yeah, so you need to get on it because it's very funny, and it's a good version of. This is very off topic, but it's a good version for people who are wanting to know the difference between the male gaze and the female gaze. Chris Hemsworth in Thor is the male gaze. Chris Hemsworth in female Ghostbusters is the female gaze. And guys, watch it and figure it out for yourselves.
Every second of it.
And I just haven't seen that yet, so I can't really speak to it. But that kind of setting the tone for where I wanted to go with this is recognizing that part of the thing that we see in this movie that we're seeing right now in this workers' revolution that we're in is that people are taking time to say, you know what? I'm going to give being my own boss a try. That there are tools now that they didn't have in Ghostbusters. Like they had crappy public access ads and newspapers and things where they really had to hustle hard. But we have tools available to us now that we're seeing people take the risk and invest in themselves with conviction and say, you know what, my idea is going to work because failure is not an option. And I'm going to do everything I can and put my whole being, my whole financial future, everything into this. And I'm going to make it work. And we are seeing it happen for people. We are seeing people invest in themselves and recognize that I am worth the investment, that I do not have to take getting yelled at by patrons in a restaurant, getting paid $3.14 an hour and hoping someone will give me an extra $10 on top of their check so that I can eat tomorrow. That I can find a way to use my idea to grow my idea and spend the amount of time I would spend at work struggling to make this money and getting bitched out every day, that maybe it's worth it to invest in myself and run my own business. Mm-hmm. And I think that we see these guys do that. And part of the enduring part of this story is find me one person that hasn't had that thought, hasn't had that quitting story of work where they walk in, shit on the boss's desk and leave and go, I'm starting my own business. And then they end up a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
And especially what's enduring about this movie is that these guys, despite being very highly educated intellectuals, once they become the Ghostbusters, are much, much different. When they're out there in their coveralls doing dirty jobs and walking into like the main scene where we see them dealing with Slimers in this hoity-toity hotel where the maitre d' is being rude and snotty to them the whole time. And how many people that are tradespeople have been treated exactly like that and have had to take the shit in order to get paid, where we see these guys be able to stick it to them and be like, oh, you don't want to pay for the work that we just did? That's fine. Why don't we just go ahead and release the ghost back in your hotel?
Yeah. And not to be a bummer, but once again, I want to say like they also benefit from having a niche skill set where they have some power in that dynamic because they can't hire another Ghostbusters. I think what's different when you're like a waiter or something like that, as I've been for many years, is there's always another waiter. I mean, right now, I think we're going through a different job shortage at the time that we're recording this podcast. But I think they also benefit from having an expertise that allows them a power dynamic. Also, like we said, they are white men who have some resources to their name, and they also don't have like kids or family that is counting on them. So they do have a lot of privilege that allows them to make these jumps. Same as Bill Gates and, Jeff Bezos' parents gave him $250,000 loan to start Amazon. So I hear what you're saying. I'm not trying to shit on it. And I feel like it's important to recognize that there's still points of privilege. And I think that's also possibly why so many white men seem to identify so much with Ghostbusters and be so possessive of it to the point that they were disgusting to Leslie Jones specifically when they were making the female Ghostbusters. There's a dark side to everything, I guess is what I'm saying. We have to be cognizant of that.
Mm-hmm. And the dark side is usually led by white men. Not all of them, though.
With Cool Whip?
Whip, yes. But no, I think I hear there's credence to what you're saying. I think we just always have to be mindful of context.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's always context. There's always a story, but also looking at how many people have had that fantasy and how many people have been able to live that now, especially right now, as we're legitimately in a workers' revolution where people are like, fuck your $10 an hour.
Yeah.
Like I can make that much selling stuff on eBay out of my house, and I don't need your $10 an hour to feed my family, and I'm not going to do it.
Well, I think I'm speaking as someone who has a steady job, with an expertise, but I think we're finally in a level of where that power dynamic is shifting, like you're saying, Ben, so that a more wider range of people have the ability to flout the power dynamic in a way that they would not have been historically. You're right.
Right. Right. I mean, do exterminators not have an expertise? Do plumbers not have an expertise that's worth paying for?
I'm thinking more of like service industry.
Yeah, but these guys would be more comparable to skilled trade.
Yeah, you're right.
Than quote unquote unskilled labor, because I hate that term because everything requires a skill set, and it's not a nonsense term used to drive poverty, and we don't like that here. But these guys would be more comparable to someone that has a skilled trade that requires years of study and a specific skill set, and that seeing them build their business and then go out into the world and still encounter people not wanting to respect them, that they can then take some of their power back from going from this you're the help mentality to being like, no, I'm actually the solver here. And if you want to treat me like shit because I wear coveralls, we can just go ahead and release the ghost back. And the number of people, that I know that have had that same very fantasy, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, you don't want to pay for my labor to fix the shit pipes that broke in your hotel or in your building. That's fine. We'll just go and take out all the work we just did, and we'll see how that goes for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's part of what makes this enduring. And I think what people can project into this and hopefully take from it is like, look at that there are times when we all have to eat shit. There are. But investing in yourself is always worth it. And that no matter where you are in life, you have an expertise in something or can get one, and that is valuable, and that your ideas can work. And Like, look at us. We just started a podcast. We literally one day said, hey, we should do this as a podcast. And now we're here.
Mm-hmm. Making so much money.
I mean, since we had the privilege talking, you wanted to negative Nancy my whole thing. There are many podcasters making much less money than the little tidbits that we are very much holding the bull higher and very, very do not be afraid to beg. Use your hands. I feel like Robin Williams here. But
I'm just joshing on you. I'm just joshing on you, Ben.
I know,
you could say that I'm the Joker. I'm the Joker to your Batman. A bump bump.
Did I just get you to do the Batman thing for me? Because that just actually makes my life.
Listen, if I caught a car, I wouldn't even know what to do with it.
I'm just a dog. I'm just dog chasing cars.
Mm-hmm.
Do I look like a guy with a plan? Yeah.
Oh God, I opened up the whole door. Okay.
You did it. You walked right into it, but that just means that I built the frame for you to open the door. So I appreciate it.
So glad we're talking about this, guys.
Well, is there anything else we want to talk about in terms of innovation mindset?
No, just that, like, recognizing that as far as creating this mindset for yourself is it's important to recognize that you have ideas that are valid, that there is a way for you to monetize your ideas, that there are people who would like to learn from you what your experience is, or that you have skills, you're capable of learning skills that are monetizable if you haven't yet. And that I encourage people to explore that and do that and lean into what makes you unique, lean into what makes you special. And rather than necessarily following the blueprint of what someone else set out to be successful, is recognize what makes you successful and what is monetizable about you. Because every person, for therapists in particular, I talk to the therapists I train about this all the time. Every one of these theories that you study and try to emulate in your life literally came about because someone studied someone else's work and sat and went, well, what if I did it this way, and had the courage to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's worth investing in yourself and your ideas, because your ideas are good. And there is no reason why anybody else's ideas are any better or any more monetizable than yours. And I think that's the enduring thing about this movie, is that it shows you exactly that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right that we have, done that with our podcast.
I'm only laughing because you guys can see us. This skeptical look on Hannah's face as she says that.
Like, I feel like I have to provide math to you guys sometimes of we've grown 5 times every year.
And thank you all who have found us and are now actively listening to us
and sharing us.
It. Mm-hmm.
And buying our merch. We appreciate you guys so much. It helps us to grow and to do this and to talk about these things and to nerd out over stuff that are just movies we like. And you guys make this possible for us, and we couldn't be more thankful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
For sure. So sliding into treatment. Yeah, we were talking about this off mic or before we started recording. I don't know. This is kind of a rare situation where there isn't really an identified client or patient for any of us. I mean, the 2 characters we haven't talked about that much is Lewis and Dana, and they're definitely going to need something post possession because they definitely had a trauma. We haven't talked about that yet this episode. So, the middle square of your guys' bingo card, trauma, you can fill it in now. They had their bodies taken over without their consent. So I'm sure they'll need a little something after this movie. But in terms of the characters we've talked about, I think the only thing I can think of is, especially as they continue to be businessmen, and as their niche ebbs and flows in terms of need, is, they might need some help with their social skills work. And I don't think they'd necessarily see a therapist. And they might be someone where they get a life coach or a coach. There's a lot of looser, I don't want to say looser, but PR person that might come and tighten up their social skills. I don't think they would go to a therapist, nor do I think they necessarily have to go to a therapist. to work on the things we're talking about, unless they really like are unless they've kind of hit a bottom where I really want to date and I can't figure out how to date, or I'm not happy with how much I work or how everything I do is about my job. Then they might see a therapist, and then we might get into some of this stuff. But I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
I don't think that where we see them at the end of the movie, it's at all likely that they would seek therapy.
Yeah.
Because all of the bad stuff that happens essentially gets erased, and we don't see that there was much catastrophic loss. Like everything gets like sucked back up into the sky and they solve the problems. So I think that it's likely that these guys are probably going to be riding high, and that the impact of the traumatic events of, like watching the floor open up and see a giant marshmallow man stomp through New York. And
yeah, I mean, I think see
maybe
Ray.
for Ray. Yeah.
I was about to say, like, I think the guilt and of like creating a gigantic monster. I mean, it's not his fault. Like he was taken advantage of. But that would be something I'd go to therapy for if I was Ray. Like, oh my God, I'd probably have nightmares about the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I probably couldn't eat marshmallows for the rest of my life. So that could be something where he could end up at a therapist's office for that.
I think a critical incident debriefing is absolutely necessary and would be
That's what
vital.
I was thinking, Ben.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I can definitely let you take that if you want to.
No, I don't want to. Go ahead.
She just wanted you to know that it was also her idea.
No.
Okay.
That as Brittany was talking, I was thinking, it probably would be really helpful if they did a debriefing, and I wonder if Ben's going to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that would be the therapeutic direction I'd recommend at this time. Like for Dana and Lewis, they're going to need therapy.
Oh yeah.
We see them okay, but we only see them for, in the aftermath of 5 minutes after this movie, that there would be problems that, seeing a monster emerge out of your chair and grope you, and then get pulled into a closet by a demon that takes over your body and turns you into a dog and forces you to have sex with your creepy neighbor.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
That's a lot. And for Dana and Lewis, who also wouldn't disrespect her and would, I don't think would ever want anything against her will to happen, anything like that. I think he just wants her to like him.
Yeah.
He likes her, but I don't, not the same creepy vibes as good old Dr. Venkman here. But I think.
No, but not dissimilar in terms of won't leave her the fuck alone.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, completely different from Venkman.
Right. But I think that they would need therapy, and the impact of what happened to them in particular, and then how it's going to get sensationalized, and there's going to be paparazzi, and people are going to want to know their story, and Geraldo Rivera this time is probably going to be tracking them down. Ridiculous mustache.
Oh my God. Yes.
That's going to be their life, and that's going to be continuously thrust into their reality to relive. They're going to need therapy. But the guys, I think, would probably be fine with, other than Ray, with a traumatic incident debriefing where they get a couple sessions where they sit down and they talk about what happened and what was going through their mind and how they felt at the time, how they feel now, how they felt afterward, walking them through step by step, connecting to their thoughts during their emotions, during their sensory experience, so that they can process it.
Yeah.
I think would be probably the appropriate call at this time. I think Winston would probably be an interesting person to talk to, because when he gets jailed, he's like, I wasn't even there. I just work for these guys. Mm-hmm. Like, why am I with these guys? Seriously.
Yeah.
Why are you grouping me with them? And now I'm in the jail. Like, I think he would probably have some issues with that. But I think, traumatic incident debriefing, and that Winston would probably go to church, because he's obviously a very spiritual man. So he'd probably take care of that with his pastor, is my guess.
Mm-hmm.
Which is valid. Pastoral counseling is valid.
Mm-hmm. Especially since he doesn't this definitely rocked him because when he started in the interview, he's like, I'll believe in whatever you need me to believe with a steady paycheck. So he's not comforted by how invested he is in the work, whereas like the main three guys, though it was traumatizing, they're also like, it is an acknowledgement of the work that they've been trying to prove, all these years.
Right. Like Winston believes in it, and he's come to believe in it, but it's not his life's work. It's just, it's a good paying job.
Yeah. So he doesn't get the thrill of like being proved right.
No.
By something he's deeply passionate about, like the other ones do. Mm-hmm. But they are scared. Even little Egon, he says, I am too terrified to put this into words, I think is what he says when they're standing up on the tower. Yeah.
It would take time. It would take time for them to process this and to digest like all that happened and the significance. And the phrase that I use all the time with people is that a trauma occurs when something changes the way you feel about yourself or the way you feel about the world. And there is a 0% chance that this does not change the way you feel about absolutely everything.
Yeah.
That there are other dimensions, that there are demons, that ghosts are real. I mean, they already believed that, but to believe that it goes as far as it does, that another dimensional portal opens up and that there's been secret societies that have been secretly planning, including building large skyscrapers in the middle of Manhattan for secret rituals, like the whole time, like, oh my God, the conspiracy theorists would go bananas.
Bananas.
You can't tell anybody anything ever again, really.
Not ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
agreed.
Like in the second one, like I always think it's in the first one, but it's not. It's the second one, like where the Titanic just pulls back into harbor and all the ghosts get off.
I know we were trying to remember if because I think those two movies are so married. I mean, we're kind of shifting into final thoughts, but is there any other treatment thing we want to remark upon?
No, I think I feel like Ben covered most of it, and so did you. I feel like the only other thing that I think would be important, which I know we've talked about in the podcast before, especially for Dana and Lewis, would just be the fact that their bodies responded. So sometimes they can feel like your body is betraying you in terms of what it does when you're experiencing a traumatic experience. So I think it would make a lot of sense that they would definitely need processing and trauma therapy or therapy in general, but to talk about that experience in and of itself. So I agree with that. I don't really feel like there's, in terms of, family or anything like that, like I really don't think there's anything else that I can think of that would be helpful or.
They're their own family, right?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. The only thing would be like, you got to think, when you have to stop bullying Ray, stop smacking him. Like when they do have an interesting dynamic that would probably be pulled apart, but they're not going to get looked at for that. So you're right, Hannah. They're not going to go to therapy for that. They're not going to therapy. As the Ghostbusters.
No,
definitely not.
Yeah,
no, absolutely.
Okay. Not. So final thoughts. I mean, I think we've sort of talked about it throughout, but like, this is a banger. I love this movie. This is one of those movies that feels like just like cuddling up on the couch and like putting a little, a throw blanket over me, just like if I come across it on like TNT in the middle of the day, I'm watching it from wherever it started to the end. We have lost Ben. Ben has been taken away by the necessities of parenting. He had a parenting mishap at home, and so he has to go.
Call it a parenting mishap.
His kid is sick. His baby's sick. So we have lost Ben to the warfare of parenthood. Just joking. So Hannah and I are going to wrap this up. So final thoughts. I mean, like I was saying, I love Ghostbusters. I don't think there's a lot of people who don't love Ghostbusters. I mean, it is, like we've already mentioned, falls victim to every movie made before now, which is just about a lot of white men. But
yeah,
I love Janine. I do love what a strong character Sigourney Weaver plays. Those are two ladies who know what they want, and they are, even Janine, she's a horny little devil and she knows what she wants, and she likes herself, which I like. I love Ghostbusters. I'm excited to see the new one. I was just doing a little Wikipedia dive while we were recording, and the characters in Ghostbusters Afterlife are actually the grandkids of Egon. So I must have been wrong in my guesstimation of his sexuality. So apologies on that. You should never assume anyone's sexuality. And I'm interested who he had babies with and then created grandbabies with. I think that'll be interesting to discover. But yeah, I love Ghostbusters. I'll watch a bajillion more times. I'll probably watch the second one soon because we talked about this one, and I'm excited for the new one. And Ben wants also for us to say he also loves Ghostbusters and he loves the cartoon more.
But
Hannah?
he loves the cartoon more.
But he loves the cartoon more.
I love Ghostbusters. Although I realized I think I mostly rewatched the second one for some reason. So I actually don't know the last time I saw the first one. So it was really fun to get to watch it again.
Well, you love a group sing along, which the second movie has.
I do love a group sing along. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Out of all the things I say, I do love that. Yeah. Anyway, so I love Ghostbusters. I think I must watch only the second one every Halloween spooky season. I always watch it. So they're my faves. I loved the newer one, and I'm excited to watch the one that's coming out.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, as always, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Popcorn Psychology, at Twitter at popcorn_psych. You can always email us at popcornpsychology@gmail.com. We are always taking thoughts, feedback, recommendations of movies or TV shows. And we always forget to mention this. We do have a Patreon. If you like listening to us and you want to help us out, you can find us at Patreon. If you Google Patreon Popcorn Psychology, we have different sort of gifts and swag at different levels of being a patron of us. And we also have TeePublic. If you go to TeePublic at Popcorn Psychology, there is merch that you can get. We also just added some new colors. So you don't just have to have the black and the red. We also have like green, purple, a bunch of different stuff. So it was a pleasure talking about Ghostbusters, and we will see you again, everybody. Bye. Who are you going to call?